Biden's policy on the border has completely fallen apart, and, well, that should have been obvious from the very get-go, seeing as from the very moment his presidency came into existence, screaming all the way, it was already a massive problem. But the latest convulsion in that particular field would happen to be the Haitian border camps that are now appearing in Del Rio, Texas. And these border camps are absolutely massive. 10,000 or so under one bridge, or more, as it might happen. And they're continuing to come across the border. And let's be entirely clear about the sort of people who are coming across. You might call them refugees, but the fact of the matter is they're refugees from Haiti that were in Mexico and who then came across the U.S. border expecting to be given gibs from the American taxpayer. And you can see this in some of the video from even particularly favorable news outlets to these particular refugees. The most prominent of which I would say is Al Jazeera, who also happened to break one of the stories about people on horseback hitting these people with whips. Well, it turns out that they weren't whips. They were just cords, which, if you don't understand the difference between those two, might I suggest that you go outside and touch grass, because you live entirely in your head. Just in case that's a newsflash to you, well, that just proves the point now, doesn't it? Now, what it is worth it to say here is that Biden's policy has been a bit schizophrenic on the border. You see, he starts the administration off by completely eliminating any plans for continuing the border wall construction, which continues on for a couple of months, and then later it gets reevaluated. And they essentially say, well, we should probably be doing this, considering that even at that point, the border crisis was already a problem. This was all happening behind closed doors, or at least not happening through the mouth of the president. But it's gotten too far now. It's completely taken over the media, and the mainstream media has become completely unable to even ignore this story. And so Biden had to come out and say, okay, yeah, the border is completely out of control, but we're going to get it back. Do not worry. It will all be fine in the future. Just trust your President Biden. That is the sort of statement he came out with just recently, just in the past day or so from when I'm recording this video. And this recounts on a redoubling of his policy. But I don't think that this statement has all too much of weight behind it. It doesn't have any teeth. And the reason for that is mostly because of the reaction to what the actual enforcement of border policy looks like in reality. Because the fact of the matter is, you aren't going to get rid of these immigrants by saying, hey, could you leave, please? It turns out that many of these people are perfectly willing to stay, even if they aren't getting support from the American government. They'll go back and forth between Mexico and the U.S., hoping for a better political moment for them to take more taxpayer dollars. And that is the central malady here. They want to be in the U.S. They don't want to be in Mexico, despite the fact that Mexico is not Haiti. It is much better than Haiti in many respects. I can understand why you wouldn't want to be in Haiti, particularly after the earthquakes and many other things which have been happening there. But you're already in Mexico. You already escaped the problem. But many of these people are simply using refugee status as an excuse to get into the U.S. for economic reasons. This is entirely obvious if you look at basically any immigration crisis in the past, whether it be from Haiti or Guatemala or any Central American country. These people will come over and simply try to either take a job, which, though it doesn't pay well in comparison to many, what Americans would consider a good paying job, to people from out of country, it seems like manna from heaven. It's amazing paying jobs over here, even if it is under minimum wage. That's how good it is over here in comparison to many other places. They're totally fine with the compromise. And the fact of the matter is, if you aren't willing to take the actual steps necessary to prevent criminals from crossing the border, which anyone who's crossing the border illegally is, well then, you're never going to be able to solve the problem. If you're not willing to take basic measures to say, okay, no, we're not going to let you pass. And whether that manifests itself as border patrol, with people on horses, getting people out of the way, trying to prevent them from crossing the border, or whether it manifests as a wall or a fence or anything that is required in order to actually lock down the border, you're never going to solve the problem, especially if you are continually undercounting the amount of undocumented immigrants in our society. Because the fact of the matter is, if you don't know what you have, you can't know if it was stolen from. And this goes doubly in the case of illegal immigration. We have no idea how many illegal immigrants are in the U.S. at any given time. The reason is because our border is so porous that we cannot know how many people are coming through and how many people are leaving, or when they came through, or how, or why. We can't know any of these things because there's no facility in place, there's no institution in place, there's no mechanism in place to actually look for these things. And the thing is about Biden's policy here, and the reason it's so fascinating, is because he continued on with this strategy for quite a long time, despite having flat zero political capital to support it, even in the slightest. And this is something which goes around his entire presidency, because whether it be raising the debt ceiling, or pushing through the infrastructure bill, or even now trying to ban encryption in chatting apps, the Biden administration continues to push for things which are far outside of what their political capital would normally allow. And it's kind of fascinating to see exactly how confident they are in this obviously losing strategy. And I can't even explain to you necessarily why they're attempting to do this. Biden has been pushing throughout his entire administration massive amounts of regulations that he has no justification for constitutionally, and that he admits he has no justification for constitutionally or politically, whether it be the eviction moratorium, the vaccine mandates, which he's now trying to push. He knows these things do not have basis in his prescribed constitutional authority, but he continues to do it, on top of not having a political mandate as well. He lost seats in the House on his first election run-through. He's probably going to lose the House in 2022 and the Senate, and he never even really won the Senate in the first place. Yes, I know we call the Democratic majority of 49 to be a Democratic majority, but the reality is that only exists if you account for the independent, that basically is a Democrat, and for the tiebreaker vote of Kamala Harris. If you're talking about pure party affiliations in the Senate, the Republicans still have the plurality of senators, because it's 50 to 49. Amazing. That is the sort of thing which completely gets ignored in many mainstream media and many alt media as well. The fact of the matter is, nothing in the 2020 election even gets close to justifying Biden's policy on any of these things. And it should be fairly encouraging to many people on the right that he is overstepping this hard, because it means that you have much more room to play with in primaries, which is one of the most important things you can do right now. Because Biden is going so far, the pendulum is only going to swing back that much harder, especially if the election becomes fortified in the near future, and it has in many states, including some of the swing states which had their elections fortified in the past, which is very good, and I really, really do appreciate that sort of thing. It's always good to look for the silver linings in this case, especially when they're so glaring and obvious. But I think that's where I'm going to leave you guys off. If you enjoyed that video, do in fact subscribe down below and check me out on other platforms, because I'm on BitChute, I'm on Brighteon, I'm on Odyssey, I'm on Rumble, and also I am on Gab and Minds if you want to check out some text posts. I'm KelKidman, this has been Breaking on the Daily, and I'm out.